Hey guys, today we step into a packed stadium of your mind, lights glaring overhead, the roar of anticipation buzzing in your ears as if you were about to make the biggest call of your life. And then you notice something in your pocket, a small, innocuous punch card stamped with exactly 20 holes. Reality check. You instantly feel that every decision you face from here on out better be damn well worth punching. You hold that little card in your hand right now. The edge is smooth, but the weight of each unused punch surprisingly tangible. You're walking down a bustling street, neon signs blinking, people chattering all around, and you know that every dime you contemplate a big life choice, an investment, a career shift, a partnership. You'll have to consciously decide, do I punch now or do I wait? That tiny hole in the card reminds you to pause, to breathe, to think. Picture yourself at a cocktail party. Someone mentions a hot startup you barely understand, with a name you can't even pronounce. Your impulse is to lean in, to nod along, maybe even slip a few bills into an online brokerage app the moment you get home. But tonight, your hand closes around that card. You picture yourself ripping off a punch for that reckless move, one of only 20 punches available in your lifetime. Suddenly, you hesitate. You ask a crucial question. Why do I want to do this? And what do I really understand about it? Every punch matters because every punch represents something finite. Your attention, your focus, and your most precious resource, time. You can't reload this card. You won't get an extra life raft of punches if you waste them early. So you learn to value quality over quantity. You start vetting every opportunity with laser focus. What's the upside? What's the downside? How does this fit into my long-term vision? If the decision fails, that wasted punch haunts you more than a late-night regret. Imagine further that each punch you take comes with a personal toll, like losing a chapter in your favorite novel or missing a chance to share a sunset with someone you love. That's the weight of every financial, professional, or deeply personal decision that truly counts. You start to filter out noise automatically. You read fewer clickbait headlines promising overnight riches. You stop scrolling past 2 minutes without examining each click's value against your remaining punches. At breakfast, you sip your coffee and glance at business headlines, where once you'd have clicked every tantalizing link, tech stock rockets at 30% overnight, secret investment hack revealed. Now you simply fold your napkin, adjust your glasses, and move on. You remind yourself, one of 20. You don't need to know every market flutter or chase every fleeting trend. You focus on the handful of ideas that genuinely resonate with your deepest convictions, because those are the ones worthy of a punch. That mental discipline spills over into your daily life. You begin to treat career moves, partnerships, and even close friendships through the lens of scarcity. Which collaborations warrant dedicating months, even years, of your best efforts? Which side hustles deserve your time when you only have so many major forks in the road? When you learn, you'll never get another card. You treat each decision like it's a high-stakes game of chess rather than a reckless sprint to the next shiny object. It's tempting, in bull markets or bull scenes of life, to dabble. Dip a toe wherever the current looks warmest. But dabbling burns through punches faster than a flame through kindling. Each half-hearted project, each quick trade, each low-conviction bet chips away at your finite allotment. So you learn to wait for clear edges, a business model you understand inside out, a mentor whose track record you trust, a partnership whose values align with your own. And here's the magic. Once you internalize the punch card mindset, you realize you probably won't even need all 20 punches. You learn that a handful of well-chosen investments, relationships, and commitments can shape an extraordinary life. You discover that true mastery comes not from frenetic activity, but from selective, intentional choices, ones you research, vet, and live with for decades. You start thinking like a master craftsman, not an amateur tinkerer. Just as a sculptor chips away at marble with supreme deliberation. So you chisel away at options, letting only the most promising forms emerge. You don't let random impulses guide you. Every time you contemplate a decision, you feel the silent question, is this worth punching now? Or should I save it for something truly transformative? Over time, your confidence grows. You recognize patterns quicker, sense pitfalls earlier, and trust your due diligence process more deeply. You find yourself saying no with ease. No to the third meeting that won't yield new information. No to the tempting but poorly understood tech fad. No to the side gig that distracts you from your core ambitions. Every no saves a punch for a more meaningful yes. By the end of your days, you might look back and find that you used maybe half the punches on your card. But that's okay, because each punch used forged a bigger impact than 1,000 wasted clicks. You created real value rather than chasing illusions. You built relationships rather than fleeting acquaintances. You grew wealth rather than burning through capital. So from this moment on, carry that mental punch card with you. Feel its weight whenever you're tempted to leap without looking. Channel that conscious pause, that silent reminder to think long and hard before you act. After all, the difference between flitting from one bright thing to the next and building a lasting, purposeful life often boils down to how you spend those 20 punches. Because in choosing carefully, you step off the hamster wheel and onto a path defined by intentionality, substance, and real success. You're back in that crowded auditorium, the soft scrape of folding chairs punctuating the air as you settle in for the next lesson. The overhead lights hum, and you can almost feel the energy of Nebraska's wide open plains buzzing beneath the roof. Then he walks in, no entourage, just a man in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, carrying the unmistakable calm confidence of someone who's seen a few winters and learned a thing or two. I came in from Nebraska today, he begins, and you lean forward. You've heard of Nebraska, endless cornfields, University of Nebraska football, that Midwestern blend of earnestness and understatement. But as soon as you hear him mention the football team with those big white helmets with the red ends, you realize you're in for more than stock tips and balance sheet analysis. Because here, an end isn't a letter or uniform detail. It's the first punch on your card. Knowledge. You chuckle with the rest of the crowd when he says, I asked one of our starters the other day what the end stands for, and he said, yeah, and knowledge. In that moment, you see how a simple joke can crack open a room. That one bit of self-deprecating humor, the star athlete who doesn't even know what and means, does more to humanize the Oracle of Omaha than any CV ever could. You're not listening to a distant legend. You're listening to your neighbor explaining why thinking matters. Then he pivots to another punch. We major in agricultural economics, and our final exam has 2 questions. You straighten up, curiosity piqued. You've sat through dry lectures with 50 multi-part questions that leave you half asleep. But these two are legendary. Question 1. What did Old MacDonald have? He pauses, letting the silence rumble through the hall. A farm, you mutter under your breath, and he cracks a grin. Farm. Professor delighted. The audience laughs, but you sense this is the warm-up. You don't want to flunk a Heisman Trophy candidate. He deadpans, and your stomach loosens further. Then comes question 2. How do you spell farm? You can practically hear the kid sweating, eyeballs darting, until he brightens up and blurts out, E-E-I-O. That punchline lands like a well-thrown football, ricocheting off the walls and igniting a roar. You laugh so hard your sides ache, and you realize the joke isn't just about memorization. It's about fundamentals and the absurdity of missing the obvious. In those 2 questions, the takeaway slams into you like a freight train. Don't overcomplicate what's simple. You feel the resonance with your own life. How often have you chased complexity, tangled investment schemes, endless side projects, buzzword-laden strategies, only to overlook the basics that truly matter? Just as the kid overlooked the simple spelling of farm, you've drifted past the fundamentals of focus, knowledge, and humility. As the laughter settles, you notice a shift in the room. Questions you had about compound interest and market forecasts fade into the background. Instead, you're pondering real education, the difference between knowing facts and understanding context. You recall that NN joke whenever you catch yourself overanalyzing a minor decision, reminding you that even the brightest athlete can mix up the alphabet if he's never paused to think. Buffett's Nebraska roots shine through in that moment, his gentle Midwestern wit, his respect for the unvarnished truth, and his talent for turning a simple anecdote into a life lesson. You sense how humility can be a powerful teaching tool. He's not here to dazzle with jargon. He's here to connect you to your own capacity for clear thought. The laughter isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder that we learn best when our defenses are down. You lean back and let the warmth of that community moment wash over you. You feel like you belong, like you're part of a conversation that stretches beyond this hall. And you realize that this humor isn't an aside, it's integral to the lesson. People who succeed, those top 2%, aren't just book smart, they're street smart. They know how to read a room, to harness attention, and to distill complexity into a story that sticks. That evening, you walk out into the cool Nebraska air, punch card still in your pocket, but your mind feels lighter. You think of that football player, sweaty and sincere, and you wonder, when was the last time you simplified your world that way? When did you last strip away the noise to laugh at your own blind spots? You promise yourself you'll carry that spirit forward, finding humor in humility, and letting each punch teach you something real. Over the next few days, you test the anecdote on friends at the coffee shop. You retell the end gag at the office. You quiz a colleague about Old MacDonald's farm. You watch as their faces shift from puzzled to enlightened to amused. And in each reaction, you see the power of a simple story to transform a passerby into a believer in deliberate thinking. You feel the thrill of passing along not just a joke, but a tool for better decisions. Meanwhile, your punch card sits quietly in your jacket. Every time someone mentions a hot tip from a podcast or a must-buy meme on social media, you glance at it. You're less tempted to punch for noise. Instead, you lean back, ask yourself, Do I really get this? Is this worth 1 of my 20? That mental check is your new baseline. It's informed by a football helmet joke and a kindergarten spelling test, a humble origin for a transformative habit. In your next big meeting, when a flashy startup pitch lights up the projector, you find yourself smiling inwardly. You let the presenters wrap up, then ask the one simple question that always matters. So, what do you really understand about how this will look 10 years from now? Silence falls, and you feel the punch card's weight gently nudging you toward aimed depth over dazzle. And so, you carry Nebraska with you. The endless skies, the football lore, the wholesome humor. You carry Buffett's voice in your ear, reminding you that knowledge isn't just data, but context, insight, and the discipline to question the obvious. You carry that kid's sweat-drenched grin, proof that even the smartest folks need to laugh at their blind spots. By weaving that football joke into your life, you gain more than a good laugh. You gain a lens through which to see every choice. You learn that humor isn't a distraction from wisdom. It's a gateway to it. And from that day forward, whenever you meet complexity, you'll think of end for knowledge. And you'll know exactly which punch to save for the big plays. You lean forward as he shifts gears, eyes bright with the promise of real-world wisdom. The room hushes. Even the hum of the overhead lights seems to dip in anticipation. You've laughed at football jokes and punch card metaphors. But now, you sense you're about to dive into something more personal. A mini-sermon on how you build a life you actually love, rather than a resume that impresses nobody but itself. He starts with a question he always gets. Who should you go to work for when you graduate? You nod, remembering your own restless evenings, scrolling through job boards, weighing company logos like they're Pokemon cards. You think bigger logo and a whole better future, right? He shakes his head. It's crazy to pick jobs that just because they look good on your resume or pay you a few bucks more to start, he says, voice warm but firm. Your pulse quickens. You know this trap. You've sat in interviews thinking, this company name will look so slick on LinkedIn. Imana. Then he tells the Harvard story. A bright young guy picks up his phone to call from the airport, all smiles, raving about rounding out a perfect resume, big consulting firm, Ivy undergrad, fancy internships. You can almost see his perfectly pressed jacket. Buffett asks him dryly, "Is that what you want to do?" The kid hesitates. "Well, no," he admits. Buffett leans in and drops the line that sticks to you like glue. "Sounds to me like you're saving up sex for your old age." You laugh, but it's a short-circuit laughter, half relief, half shock. In that instant, you feel the blood drain from your chase prestige fantasies. Saving up sex for your old age? You mull it over, spending your best years on work that bores you, banking the fun and purpose for some undefined future. But what if, when old age rolls around, you wake up and find the bank is empty? He pauses to let that sink in. You shift in your chair, connecting the dots. Passion doesn't come later. It has to start now. Your shoulders relax as he continues. Go to work for whoever you admire most. You can't get a bad result, trust me. You feel a spark of excitement. This isn't just career advice. It's a permission slip to chase what lights you up. He says the kids ran out of that hall, self-employed, within weeks. But he tempers his gumption with genuine caution. You may have to temper that. Find a balance if you need health benefits or mentorship. But the core idea stands. Pick someone whose work you respect, whose values you share, and whose mission fuels your curiosity. Then he invites you to play a little game. You can't help but grin. This is Buffett's signature move, turning a lecture into a thought experiment that sticks. He says, imagine you get to choose any one of your classmates to receive 10% of their lifetime earnings. You'll watch that income stream for the rest of their life. You have 24 hours to think it over, and you only get one pick. The room buzzes with silent calculation. You start scanning faces in your mind. The overachievers with perfect GPAs. The kid who aced every test but never cracked a smile. The class clown with a knack for cracking complex code in seconds. You dismiss the rich dad kid, no merit in daddy's gold. You breeze past the straight A student. The grades alone won't guarantee world-changing impact. Who do you see? You see the kid who tutors classmates without making a big deal, who stays late to debug group projects, who treats every setback as a chance to learn. You realize you're looking not for GPAs, but for grit, integrity, people you'd trust with your life savings, not just a term paper. You jot mental notes, initiative, energy, self-made, reliability, generosity. These are the traits that make someone worth investing in, both literally and figuratively. You feel a swell of gratitude for that kid in your class who quietly helped you before presentations without expecting credit. You know that person will outlast every chart-topping GPA. Then Buffett flips the script. Now you must pick someone to short 10% of their lifetime earnings. You'll pay out 10% of whatever they make. Quietly, you scan again. Who's most likely to blow all your money? You avoid the obvious low grades offender. Surprise, they're too disengaged to rise far enough to cost you much. Instead, you land on the person who overpromises, cuts corners, or thinks the world owes them something. You remember whispered complaints? They always take credit. They bail when the work gets hard. They chase the easiest road. That person might climb higher than you expect, but without integrity, they'll falter. In that moment, you see character laid bare. It's not about the talents you're born with. It's about the habits you build and the choices you make. Buffett's advice smacks you like a punch. The best predictor of success isn't brilliance, it's consistency. Doing the right thing when no one's watching. You tuck that lesson into your mental toolbox. Whenever you meet someone new, you start asking, do they do more than their share? Are they generous with their time? Do they own up to mistakes? You catch yourself taking small wagers, assigning those 10% stakes in everyday interactions. You see how easily people inflate their resumes, but how powerfully they reveal themselves in the little moments, showing up early, offering help, returning calls. As Buffett wraps up the exercise, you feel a subtle shift in your own self-evaluation. You wonder, if someone could short 10% of my life earnings, what would they pick? The question lands like a mirror. You vow to cultivate those qualities you admire in others, integrity, generosity, energy, so that anyone choosing you would gladly hand over that 10%. Then he brings you back. That's the game. Now live by it. You realize this isn't a one-off thought experiment. It's a lifelong compass. You start to carry that vision into team projects and networking events, sizing people up, not by titles or networks, but by their actions and values. You step out of that hall humming with possibilities. The crisp air feels fresher as you walk across campus, the trees whispering in the breeze. You can't stop replaying the saving up sex line. How you'll never stash passion for some undefined tomorrow. You've committed to doing what you love now, not later. You're mentally scanning every person you know through the 10% game, preparing to invest in integrity and to short complacency. That afternoon, you open your laptop and draft a message to a former teammate who always went the extra mile. You tell them you admire their work ethic and wonder if they'd chat about collaborating on a project you care about. Then you fold in the flip side. You reach out to someone you've seen cut corners, offering constructive feedback rather than resentment, because sometimes you have to short someone's pattern before they can change it. In your next job search, you apply not for the flashiest title, but for the role at a company whose mission you can't wait to wake up to at 7 a.m. You research not just salaries, but leadership styles, cultural values, and long-term impact. When a recruiter mentions a better resume bullet, you smile and say, "Thanks, but I'd rather work for someone I respect." Over time, you notice a pattern. Opportunities flow in when you follow that advice. Doors open because people sense your authenticity. You're not chasing prestige. You're chasing purpose. And when you need to make a tough call, declining an offer, ending a partnership, you remember the 10% game and choose the long-term winner over fleeting gains. Slowly, unconsciously, you build a career that feels more like a calling than a checklist. You find yourself waking up energized, ready to tackle the day's challenges, not because you have to, but because you want to. You've traded punch card anxiety for purposeful momentum, each major decision now fueled by genuine passion and clear-eyed vetting. And whenever you catch yourself leaning toward the next shiny resume builder, you hear that voice in your head. Are you saving fun for your old age? You shake your head and pivot to what truly matters. Working with people you admire and building the kind of legacy you'd proudly hand your punch card off to. You feel the echo of that 10% exercise pulsing through your thoughts as you walk out into the late afternoon sun. That mental wager, buying one classmate, shorting another, revealed more than who succeeds. It revealed why they succeed. Now you realize that every person you admire, every success story you retell, shares a secret ingredient, habits forged long before the first big break. You start by noticing these subtle patterns in your own life. You remember that colleague who always turned in deliverables early, who never let a typo slip by, who stayed late to help a teammate debug code without asking for credit. You realize those weren't sporadic acts of generosity. They were habits, daily choices that compounded like interest. You begin to see how small acts of integrity build a character so strong that even a hurricane of temptation can't uproot it. Integrity, you remind yourself, isn't a flashy trophy you earn once and hang on the wall. It's a chain of tiny decisions. Choosing not to shade numbers on a budget report, returning a lost wallet intact, telling a hard truth in a performance review rather than soft pedaling. Each of those choices is a link, and when you repeat them enough, you form a chain so solid it's too heavy to break. You quote to yourself that old proverb, "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken," and you feel its weight sink into your bones. Now you turn your attention to initiative. You think of the kid in your study group who never waited for instructions. If he saw a room that needed cleaning, he grabbed a rag. If he spotted a bug in the test suite, he dove into the terminal. You remember how he'd sidestepped the official process when paperwork stalled the team, simply drafting a quick spreadsheet to keep everyone on track. You admire how he didn't need permission to make things better. He just did it again and again, turning self-directed action into second nature. You realize you've been waiting for permission too often to pitch your idea, to volunteer for the new initiative, to reach out to the mentor you admire. But initiative isn't granted at the top of an org chart. It's claimed in the trenches, one small choice at a time. So you start practicing. You send that proposal email without waiting for someone else's go-ahead. You offer to train the new hire on the legacy system, even if it means staying past quitting time. You flood your calendar with meetings that invite responsibility rather than meetings that merely fill a slot. Honesty feels next on your list, but you quickly see how it's deeper than admitting mistakes. It's about refusing to inflate your numbers in a pitch deck, even when investors beg for sleeker projections. It's about owning up when your code crash lands in production, rather than hoping no one notices. You recall the sting of a manager who blamed a teammate for your oversight, an act you once excused as tough management. But now you know honesty isn't just about truth-telling. It's about protecting the team's trust, even at the cost of personal discomfort. Generosity surfaces as another cornerstone. You notice how the most admired people in your network freely share their time, their insights, their connections. They mentor junior folks without expecting a cut of their future earnings. They celebrate others' wins as eagerly as their own. You remember a senior engineer who quietly forwarded you an obscure blog post weeks before a major outage, helping you avert disaster. That gesture, small in the moment, rippled into respect, loyalty, and an unspoken vow to pay it forward. You start tracing the domino effect of generosity in your own circle. One morning, you print out high-priority tasks for your team, tacking them to a whiteboard so no one wastes time asking what's next. Later, you pause a heated debate to paraphrase and validate a quiet voice in the corner. That simple act of acknowledgement diffuses tension and unlocks ideas no one realized were brewing. You see generosity not as charity, but as strategic relationship building that compounds trust exponentially. Energy emerges as a less celebrated but equally vital trait. You've seen people coast on talent, only to stumble when the marathon got too long. In contrast, the true winners maintain a restless curiosity. They read voraciously on weekends. They brainstorm in the shower. They treat every failure as a spark for the next experiment. They aren't wired for comfort, they're wired for momentum. You know you can't outsource energy. It's generated by habits, regular exercise, mindful breaks, small victories that fuel your drive rather than drain your reserves. Responsibility calls out to you next. You recall the colleague who never replied, "That's not my job," but always asked, "How can I help?" You see that taking ownership, even for failures that aren't 100% yours, signals bravery. It shows you stand behind your work and inspires others to stand behind you. You decide to claim that mantle. You draft a summary of team progress every Friday, so no stakeholder feels left in the dark. You volunteer to lead the post-mortem, not to cast blame, but to institute changes that prevent the next outage. Competence rounds out the list, but you realize it's not the sparkliest star on your chart. Technical chops matter, but without character, they're hollow. Nobody brags about an engineer who shipped bug-ridden code. The real magic happens when competence combines with integrity and initiative. When a designer crafts an interface that delights users, then follows up to fix usability snags they discover months later. That blend of skill and stewardship cements reputations in a way raw talent never could. You feel a surge of clarity as you inventory these qualities: integrity, initiative, honesty, generosity, energy, responsibility, competence, and see them not as abstract ideals, but as habits you can cultivate. You understand that habits aren't transformations you conjure overnight. They're choices you make every day, dozens of times. Choosing to say, "I was wrong," instead of covering up. Choosing to ask, "How can I help?" instead of drifting away. Choosing to stay curious when the world tells you to settle. You decide to map out your next 20 habit punches. You open your notebook and list small, concrete actions. Review my personal code of ethics each morning. Volunteer 1 hour weekly to mentor a junior colleague. Schedule a daily learning sprint to explore unfamiliar topics. Write a weekly email highlighting someone else's contribution. You realize each of these commitments is a punch in your own character card, and that, unlike the original 20 investment punches, these habit punches refill every 24 hours. That evening, you share your habit list with a trusted friend, asking for accountability. You ask them to spot you when you slip, when you miss a learning sprint, when you dodge a tough conversation, when you default to silence rather than generosity. You know that asking for help is itself a habit worth building. Humility in action. Over the next week, you catch yourself mid-stride. You think about fudging a report to look better. Then pause. Which punch is this? Integrity or convenience? You see the urge to skip the daily learning sprint. Energy or ease? And you feel the weight of that habit card settling on your desk. You choose the harder path, savoring the sense of alignment as you engage with the material. Ask tough questions and admit your blind spots. Gradually, you notice changes in how others see you. Invitations to collaborate arrive unsolicited. Peers start deferring to your judgment, not because of your title, but because they trust your word. Your network widens organically. You're attracting people who value the same traits. You realize that character habits don't just sweeten your personal life, they supercharge your professional trajectory. When you face the next 10% choice, whether to invest time, money, or emotional bandwidth, you no longer reach blindly. You vet the opportunity against your habit map. Does this align with my integrity? Will I need initiative? Can I be generous in this context? If it doesn't measure up, you hold back. If it does, you lean in, knowing that your habit chains will sustain you long after the novelty fades. In that layered temperament, you find a quiet confidence. You're no longer chasing definitions of success that feel borrowed or brittle. You're building a foundation rooted in repeated acts of your own conscious choosing. Each time you practice a habit, you're reinforcing a chain link that carries the weight of your reputation and your future. And so, every morning, you reach for that invisible habit card in your wallet of intention. You know it refreshes at midnight. But you make every act count within each 24-hour cycle. Because unlike the one-time punches you reserve for landmark decisions, these habit punches are renewable resources, if only you remember to spend them wisely. You walk into your next meeting not as an actor playing a role, but as the sum of your habitual choices, someone whose integrity and initiative breathe life into every project. You realize that true success isn't a sudden windfall, but the steady accrual of character capital, built link by link, habit by habit, until you stand among the 2% who succeed not by luck, but by design. The air crackles with anticipation as he pauses, surveying the room with a mischievous glint. You've absorbed punch cards, farming finals, career gambits, and character habits, and now, without missing a beat, he pivots. All right, let's talk about what's on your mind. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath. This is the moment you've been waiting for, the real-time, unscripted Q&A that takes everything from theory into the messy territory of everyday dilemmas. He leans on the podium, sleeves still rolled, eyes scanning for that first brave soul. But before the hands shoot up, he flashes a grin and holds up one finger. Now, folks, I've got something special for you. Just because you sat through all this doesn't mean you leave empty-handed. You lean forward, curiosity piqued. He nods toward the back of the room and almost whispers conspiratorially, I've put together an exclusive checklist that distills everything I've learned about investing. My punch card rules, circle of competence filter, habit chains, into one simple guide. Your mind races. A Buffett-approved checklist? You can feel your pulse quicken. He continues, voice warm and playful. I know you love free stuff as much as I love a good semi-poached fish. So here's the deal. If you want your hands on this free checklist, head to the description link or the pinned comment of this video. A ripple of laughter runs through the crowd. You scribble mental notes. Link in description. Pinned comment. He lets the moment breathe, watching you commit every word to memory before he adds, keep it handy. It's chock full of the one-page rules I wish I'd had when I was 22. But fair warning, you won't find a list of what I'm buying or selling. That's locked tighter than Fort Knox. Henri, you grin. His transparency about secrecy is oddly reassuring. Now the ice is broken. You feel a surge of confidence? This isn't the polished keynote of a faceless guru. It's a genuine invitation to a live conversation. He clasps his hands and gestures broadly. So, anything you want to know? Anything at all, except what we hold in our portfolio. A hand shoots up in the front row. You can sense the first question drifting into his ear via a wireless mic. He nods encouragingly. Yes. Right here. What's on your mind? You watch as the questioner leans forward. The hush in the room thickens. You can feel the electricity of possibility. Every question is a doorway into the mind of a man who's built fortunes by thinking differently. You imagine what you'd ask if it were your turn. Would you delve into how Buffett sizes his bets? Or maybe you'd probe his process for deciding when to sell. Buffett's gaze lands squarely on the questioner. Go ahead. Oh, and the first voice emerges, clear and measured. Mr. Buffett, you often talk about sticking to your circle of competence. But how do you actually define its boundaries? When do you admit you're outside it? You feel a thrill. This is the question everyone's thinking, but only the boldest will ask. You settle in, ready to absorb every nuance of the answer. Because once he begins, you know you'll glean more than a formula. You'll see the thought patterns that separate the 2% who thrive from the 98% who fizzle. As the voice trails off, he nods appreciatively. Great question, he says, his voice carrying the ease of someone who's fielded tougher ones. You admire that humility. He doesn't dismiss or minify the question. Instead, he leans forward, elbows on the lectern, and invites you into his process. You watch as his expression becomes thoughtful. Then, In that conversational drawl you've come to expect, he begins to unpack circle of competence, not as a rigid fence, but as a living boundary that expands and contracts with your experience. You catch every anecdote about chewing gum economics and useless airline startups, stories that aren't tangents, but the very marrow of his teaching. Somewhere midway, you notice a student on the side scribbling furiously, capturing each metaphor. That it's better to know one or two things well than 1,000 things poorly. That your edge lies in deep familiarity, not in chasing every hot sector. That acknowledging the edge of your knowledge is the first step toward growing it. The question winds down, but the lesson echoes on. Competence isn't about omniscience, it's about honest self-assessment, sustained curiosity, and the courage to say, I don't know when you truly don't. You feel as if you've been handed a lantern in a foggy harbor. Suddenly you see the shoals to avoid. He finishes with a grin. That's my circle of competence. You've got your own. Find it, own it, and don't wander too far without a life jacket. The room erupts into applause, and you clap with renewed vigor because you know this isn't another canned soundbite. It's a beacon for making every one of your remaining punches count before the next hand can rise. He gestures again. Next question. Remember anything but our ticker symbols. You catch a few chuckles. He's broken the ice with charm and disarmed the crowd with humor. Now the floodgates are open. A woman on the left asks about mistakes. When his biggest errors turned into the greatest lessons, you lean in, recalling how he once admitted that buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was his lousy textile business blunder, and how that failure pivoted him toward higher margin enterprises. You know you're about to get that story fresh from the source. He nods, and your pulse quickens again. Each answer is a masterclass in clarity, humility, and insight, pieces of a mosaic that reveal how he navigates complexity with simple principles. You realize you're witnessing a rare blend of showmanship and substance, the theatrical tension of live Q&A mixed with the solid ground of decades worth of experience. Between each question, he peppers in quips, self-deprecating asides about his airline stock hotline, jokes about writing down the Coca-Cola formula, riffs on the Boy Scout creed. You grin every time because these moments do more than entertain. They remind you that learning can be playful, that even the most serious topics need a human spark. And through it all, you sense the connective tissue in every quip, every anecdote, every checklist link funnels back to one central theme, making thoughtful, well-informed decisions within a framework of integrity and self-awareness. You feel a subtle shift inside. Questions don't intimidate you anymore. They are invitations to expand your own punch card toolkit. As the session rolls on, you notice your anxiety about getting it right dissolving. You realize that in this Q&A space, it's okay to stumble, to ask naive questions, to chase imperfect answers. Because here, vulnerability isn't a liability, it's the key to unlocking real growth. After several more exchanges about self-discipline, philanthropy, and market cycles, he clocks the time. He glances at his watch, a rare departure from the scripted talk, and says, Folks, I could keep going all night, but I promised I'd catch my flight back to Omaha. You hear a collective sigh. You wanted more. He stands, brushes imaginary lint from his shirt, and smiles that gentle, reassuring grin. Keep those questions coming online, he says. I'll read through the comments and get back to a few of them. Again, anything but what stocks I own. He winks, and the crowd laughs warmly. You rise to your feet, joining in the standing ovation. You feel invigorated, charged with new mental tools, new story frameworks, and a checklist waiting in the description link to guide your next big decision. You realize that this Q&A wasn't just a detour. It was the beating heart of the entire lecture, the live crucible where theory meets practice. As you step out into the evening air, you clutch your newly downloaded checklist and replay the best moments in your head. You already know which questions you'd ask next time, and you can't wait to test his answers against the scenarios in your own life. You feel part of something bigger, a community of 2% thinkers sharpening their punch cards. One well-asked question at a time. You settle back in your seat, leaning into that electric hush as he readies to map out one of the most critical concepts of the lecture, your circle of competence. You feel a tingle. This is the territory where theory meets the hard edge of reality. He starts off casually, like he's chatting over coffee rather than commanding a packed hall. I've got an old-fashioned belief, he says, voice warm and unhurried, that you should only expect to make money in things you understand. You nod, already feeling a kinship because you've chased buzzwords and trended topics before, only to be left holding a bag of confusion. Now, you're primed to learn how to hold on to something real. He leans forward, elbows on the lectern. When I say understand, I don't just mean knowing what the product does. I mean understanding how the business's economics will look 10 or 20 years from now. You picture yourself with a crystal ball, trying to predict next week's Netflix subscriber count. But instead, he's handed you a more reliable tool. Deep familiarity, not guesswork. He launches into the Wrigley example. Chewing gum economics. I know in general what Wrigley's gum business will look like 10 years from now. The internet isn't going to change which flavor you chew. Juicy fruit and spearmint will still be on the shelf. You smile at the simplicity. Flavors haven't changed, but markets have. He's telling you that certain businesses sit on rock-solid fundamentals, and those belong squarely inside your circle. You jot down a mental note. Pick businesses with predictable economics. You recall the half-hearted tech venture you toyed with last year. You knew the buzzwords, but not how the margins worked, and it fizzled. Now you resolve to vet only those prospects where you can sketch the economics on a napkin. No complex algorithms required. He pivots to the auto industry. I once carried a 70-page list of 2,000 auto companies from the early 1900s. I knew the auto business would transform this country, but I couldn't pick the winners then, and neither could anyone else. You feel the weight of that admission. Even when you foresee a big trend, you still need to stay inside what you understand, so you don't buy the idea of internet revolution. You buy the portions you can model with confidence. You start testing yourself. When you see a headline about electric vehicles, you pause. Do you understand the supply chain, battery chemistry, and dealer networks of these companies? Or are you chasing a sector trend? If it's the latter, you step back. No punch is wasted and on unknown territories. He segues to airlines with a grin. In 1991, if you added up aggregate earnings of every airline since the Wright brothers, it came to less than zero. People love flying. But the economics? Terrible. You wince, recalling your one ill-fated airline stock buy. Your airline stock hotline deal gone wrong. He's reminding you that popularity doesn't equal profitability. You cross airlines off your mental shortlist of investable arenas. Next, TV sets. You'd think selling TVs would be a dream business. Everyone wanted one. But today, no U.S. maker makes a set. They're all out of business. You feel a flash of irony. A business that helped define consumer culture can still be decimated if you don't understand the global manufacturing and cost pressures. You vow to respect the battlefield, not just the front row glamour. He pauses, letting the point sink in. Some industries aren't for you, no matter how big or familiar. You remind yourself, your circle excludes sectors where you lack deep insight into cost structures, competitive moats, and distribution channels. Then he moves to Coca-Cola, voice brightening. Now Coca-Cola, that's within my circle. 100-year-old fizzy drink, selling over 1 billion servings a day worldwide. If you asked me to project what the economics of that business will look like in 10 years, I won't be wildly off. You feel that resonance. You've bought that soda many times, and you know how those vending machines are. You scratch Coke onto your short list. He summarizes, your circle of competence is defined by how well you understand a business's future cash flows, not by how sexy it sounds. You lock that phrase into your memory. You realize that your own circle includes industries you've worked in, hobbies you've mastered, and products you buy weekly. Real domains where you can project confidently. Next, he ties circle of competence to intrinsic value. Understanding a business matters, but only valuing what it truly returns to you matters more. You lean forward. This is where the second punch lands. He flips to a slide with no numbers, just words. Intrinsic value, present value of future cash flows. You feel a momentary jolt, but he immediately unpacks it with his trademark clarity. If you were all-knowing about the future and could predict every dollar this business would throw off between now and Judgment Day, discounted at the proper rate, that number is its intrinsic value. You breathe. No magic formulas. Just cash in, cash out, and a sensible discount rate. He illustrates with a farm metaphor. Old Aesop said, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. But it isn't complete. You need to ask, how sure are you those 2 birds exist? And how long will it take to catch them? You grin. That same farm final keeps reappearing as a teaching pivot. You imagine 2 birds perched in a leafy bush, and you're weighing whether to chase them or savor the one in your palm. You jot. Intrinsic, when and how many birds, when, and how certain. You know that if interest rates are high, you need those 2 birds sooner to justify giving up the one in hand. If rates are low, you can wait longer. You note how this applies to everything from farmland to rental properties to dividend-paying stocks. He looks out over the audience. I can tell you exactly what cash flows I get from U.S. government bonds. It's printed on the bond. Stocks. You have to estimate. You laugh quietly. Those bonds do make life simpler, but you wouldn't call them glamorous. He's driving home that the predictable is easy to value, while the unpredictable requires a margin of safety. Then comes the famous margin of safety quip. You're not buying the stock, you're buying a piece of the business. You want a discount on your price that absorbs your estimation errors. You recall that you once skipped adding a margin of safety, and that misstep still stings. Now you write it in bold. Always demand a margin of safety in your intrinsic value estimate. He wraps up the core lesson with a practical checklist. Mental map. Define your circle. industries you know intimately. 2. Estimate future cash flows, realistic conservative numbers. 3. Choose a discount rate, reflecting the risk and your opportunity cost. 4. Calculate intrinsic value, sum of discounted cash. 5. Compare to market price, only buy when price is well below intrinsic. You feel the gears shift in your mind. This is the scaffold you've needed. A step-by-step route out of rumor-ridden speculation into disciplined valuation. You tuck that checklist away as the squire of your financial arsenal. He doesn't leave you hanging on theory alone. He recounts a Buffett hallmark moment, carrying that 2,000 company auto list at the dawn of the century, only to watch thousands fail and 3 giants survive. He says, even if you see the forest, you still need the binoculars to pick the right trees. You feel that binocular clarity. Pick fewer trees, but pick those you can see every leaf of. He closes with a gentle warning. If you step outside your circle, you're essentially filing your punch card decision blindfolded. You might get lucky, but over 20 punches, blind luck isn't a strategy. You feel the gravity of that. Juggling 20 big decisions is hard enough. Don't tempt fate with areas you barely understand. As he steps back for the next question, you sit up a little straighter. You've absorbed a blueprint for weighing every opportunity against the twin pillars of competence and value. You realize your punch card now operates on 2 intertwined currencies, scarce decision slots and deep, confident understanding. You rise later that evening and sift through your watch list, where once you chased the next hot IPO, now you filter by inside my circle. You look at companies where you've had personal experience, coffee shops you visit weekly, grocery chains you trust, software tools you use daily. You sketch rough cash flow projections on a napkin, apply your discount rate, and feel the thrill of calculating intrinsic values with real conviction. When you glance at that napkin the next morning, you see not just scribbles, but a transformed approach. Your decisions now rest on bedrock, not sand. You know you'll still face the temptation of blind punches, those moments when hype beckons. But now, before you reach for your card, you'll ask, is this inside my circle? What's the intrinsic value? Is there a margin of safety? You close your eyes briefly and imagine folding away 10 of your 20 punches, reserved exclusively for ideas that pass this test. You feel a calm certainty settle in your chest. This framework will guide you not just to better investments, but to better decision-making in every realm of life. And so, you walk into tomorrow equipped with a lantern for your intellectual boundaries and a scale for intrinsic worth. You carry that lantern and scale into meetings, into side projects, even into personal decisions, because understanding what you don't know is as powerful as the knowledge you do possess. With each new opportunity, you will whisper to yourself Buffett's words, stay in your circle, value intelligently, and demand that margin of safety. That mantra will ring in your mind each time you weigh a potential punch. By leaning on competence and rigorous valuation, you step confidently into the rarefied air of the 2%, where success comes not from hype, but from disciplined mastery of your chosen fields. You settle back in your chair, the glow of that circle of competence lessons still warm in your mind. He leans slightly forward, lowers his voice just a hair, and you'd know you're about to hear about missteps, those moments when the best laid plans go awry and the real lessons hide in the wreckage. I've made plenty of mistakes, he begins, voice candid. Some I paid for. Some I paid dearly for. He adds with a chuckle that belies the sting of those memories. You feel a flicker of relief, because even the heroes you idolize stumble. It's in the fall that you learn to stand taller. He launches into the first cautionary tale, the cigar butt approach. You picture a crowd of eager investors rummaging through smoky sidewalks, looking for soggy, discarded stubs. That's how we started in the 50s, scouring Moody's manual for cigar butts of stocks so cheap they offered a puff of value and then little more. You smile at the imagery. People stooped over dirt, picking up worthless cigars, hoping for one last drag. I bought Berkshire Hathaway itself as one of those cigar butts, he confesses. It was a lousy textile business, selling below its working capital value. I thought I saw a one-puff bargain. You imagine him walking through threadbare mills. The hum of old looms his soundtrack. He paid next to nothing, convinced he'd pocket a quick profit. But over the next 2 decades, that cigar never gave more than a faint flicker. He pauses, letting you absorb the irony. The Verkspenge that became the foundation of his empire started as a bucket of soggy rags. You sense the lesson blooming. Cheap businesses can stay cheap. Punishingly cheap. That's the enemy of compound interest. He admits, I should have sold it, liquidated the asset, and moved on. Had I done that, Berkshire's losses would have been just a one-time puff. But I held on, waiting for the next spark that never came. You feel a pang of empathy because you've clung to underperforming projects, convinced they'd turn around. You've told yourself, just one more push and it'll pay off. But like him, you've learned that time is the enemy of a bad venture. Even a small misallocation can compound into a major opportunity cost. Then he shifts to his airline stock hotline anecdote. You grin as he describes sitting up late at night, dialing an 800 number, confessing, I'm an airline stock addict, and begging the operator to talk him down whenever he eyed airline shares. I bought you as Air Preferred stock in '89, he says. Voice equal parts amusement and chagrin. As soon as my check cleared, they slipped into the red and never emerged. You visualize the ticker flashing, his heart thumping as he hit a buy, only to watch the losses mount. You feel the resonance because you've chased shiny sectors, drawn in by glamour and missed the financial fundamentals. You jot a mental note. Airlines are habit-forming mistakes, but the drama doesn't end there. He leans back, fingers steepled, and delivers the kicker. His biggest mistakes aren't bad buys, they're missed opportunities. You blink, that stings more. Buying a bad business hurts, but letting a great one slip by? That's a gnawing ache that never fades. He recounts the Fannie Mae moment. In the early 90s, Fannie Mae hit rough patches, trading at fire sale prices. He knew enough about mortgage-backed securities to see that the government's backing and historical performance made it a strong long-term bet. But he sucked his thumb, hesitated too long, convinced he'd catch the next discount, only to watch the price climb away. You feel that familiar twinge, the regret of passing on an investment you knew was solid. You recall the email from a broker you deleted too quickly, the link you filed under watch later and never returned to. He wraps it in a stark warning. Mistakes of omission can cost more than those of commission because they're invisible. You don't get a blot on your P&L statement. You just count the dollars you never made. You absorb that wisdom, Bad commissions bleed your balance sheet. Omissions bleed your confidence. You vow to seize the next clear-cut opportunity, not let analysis paralysis clip your wings. You tell yourself, I will clear my calendar when a high conviction chance appears. Then comes the punch card tie-in. He raises his eyebrows and asks the room, what happens if you waste your punches on bad idea after bad idea? You have fewer for the real beauties. That resonates like church bells in your mind. 20 punches. Don't waste them dredging up cigar butts or chasing airline dreams. Save them for the great ideas you'll never regret. He drills deeper. Your biggest mistakes will be the things you knew enough to do but didn't. And help you sense that this is the real bedrock of success, the courage to act when clarity strikes. You reflect on your own life, dreams you shelved for fear of failure, partnerships you never formed, side hustles you never launched. You realize that those might have made you richer, wiser, and more fulfilled than any fantasy stock ever could. He gives you a simple prescription. When you find a high-confidence opportunity inside your circle, with a margin of safety, take your punch. Don't delay. Because every pause risks letting that opportunity evaporate. You remember a failed freelance gig you almost pitched, but somehow talked yourself out of it because it wasn't big enough? You cringe now, knowing you missed a perfect match for your skills and interest. You decide that next time, you'll treat any worthy proposition as a ticket worth punching, whether it's a $1,000 contract or the next visionary tech idea. Buffett doesn't leave you drowning in regret, though. He balances the confession with hope. Mistakes teach you faster than successes. He declares, every error I've made has been a free PhD in what not to do if I pay attention. You sit up straighter, excited by the prospect. What lessons wait for you in your next blunder? He closes with a mantra. Embrace your cigar butts, but don't live on them. Chase the big beluga whales in the ocean, not minnows in the stream. He chuckles at his own metaphor, flashing the unmistakable grin of a man who delights in playful imagery. You laugh, picturing a giant whale gliding past, leaving minnows scrambling in its wake. That night, you revisit your watch list. You strike out the old cigar butt plays that have lingered too long, the penny stock rumors, the dusty side projects you never loved. You highlight a handful of high-conviction names worthy of your punch card, established businesses you understand, priced below intrinsic value, with margins of safety that cushion your risk. You also scout omission opportunities, ideas you almost pursued but let slip away. You make a list, a content partnership, a peer coaching session, a small real estate deal. You pick one and plan to allocate one of your finite punches to it within 24 hours. As you close your laptop, you feel a sense of empowerment. You're no longer haunted by regrets of yesterday or futures unseized. You've learned to track both what you buy and what you let pass, then act decisively on the right ones tomorrow. When the next tempting tip flashes across your screen, you'll reach for your mental punch card and ask, is this a cigar butt, an airline mistake, or my next big whale? And most importantly, am I acting on it or letting it slip away? Because in the grand ledger of your life, the highest cost isn't dollar losses. It's the opportunities you never grab. And you've sworn to be the rare soul who turns that regret into resolve, punching boldly for the 2% success that waits just beyond your fear of failure. You lean forward, still carrying the glow from learning how to spot a bargain and avoid a dud when he pivots to a topic that few dare to broach: sell discipline. He smiles as though he's about to share a secret handshake with just you and says, "People always ask me when I decide to sell a business. Let me tell you, that's a rare day in my calendar." You sense the gravity in his tone. This isn't the same punch card decision you make 20 times in a lifetime. This is a no-sell mindset for assets you own outright. He explains that Berkshire's wholly owned subsidiaries are treated as family heirlooms rather than trading cards. You picture those businesses lining up behind him: the insurance operations, the railroads, the energy units, each one more than an investment, a legacy. He recounts the early days of See's Candy. You imagine the chocolate-scented aroma wafting through his office as he watched the company grow from a small candy retailer into a network of boutiques. When a private equity giant once dangled a check for 3 times See's intrinsic value, he says he almost choked on his morning coffee, thinking of all the families and employees that built that brand. "No thanks," he told them. You feel the warmth in that refusal. It wasn't ego, but a deep respect for what they'd created together. As you absorb that, you realize how unconventional it is. Most investors would leap at a 3x offer, but he frames it like a marriage. Once you tie the knot, you don't expect a bigger wedding ring every year. You expect to build a life together. That analogy settles in your mind. You see how changing partners for a bigger payout can feel tempting, but it also carries a hidden cost: the loss of shared history and trust. He shares another example: Buffalo News. You hear the rustle of ink-stained pages in a family newsroom that's been serving Omaha for generations. When digital media threatened to vaporize print outlets, he steered the paper through the storm rather than sell at fire sale prices. You understand that selling in panic would have bankrupted not just the newspaper, but the community's sense of continuity. He wasn't staking a short-term profit. He was safeguarding a civic institution. You sense a pattern. If you own 100% of a business and it's built on a solid foundation, selling it destabilizes more than your balance sheet. He tells you that Berkshire only considers selling if 2 things happen: the management proves untrustworthy, or the business's economics deteriorate drastically. Otherwise, you hold. You realize that sell discipline isn't about timing the market. It's about timing the life cycle of a business. He elaborates, "I tell my partners in the annual report exactly that. We won't sell our great businesses just because someone waves a bigger check." You feel the transparency in that vow. You remember how often firms dangle buyout offers to shake shareholders loose. That prospect makes you queasy. One day, you own a dream. The next, you're packing up your desk. His promise signals that with the right partner, you build, you don't bail. Then he offers a caveat. But this rule doesn't apply to minority holdings. If we own 5% of a public company and the price is beyond what we think it's worth, we'll sell. You feel the logic. For minority stakes, you're still riding the market's waves, so price matters. But for businesses where you control the ship, price bows to long-term vision. You see that control equals patience, not volatility. He leans back and smiles. "It's funny, when I started, I had more ideas than cash. Now I have more cash than ideas." You grin, picturing a younger him furiously scribbling potential investments on napkins. "Today," he says, "Berkshire generates billions of free cash flow every quarter. Far from running out of ideas, he simply can't deploy that money quickly enough. Yet he doesn't sell the golden geese he already owns. You understand the paradox. Cash abundant, ideas scarce. There's no incentive to sell at a premium. The real goal is to deploy cash into new opportunities within your circle. Your mind drifts to the economic principles pinned in the back of the annual report. You recall the list. No forced sales, no margin calls, no irrational auctions. You realize those aren't just rules. They're guardrails that keep you from throwing away a lifetime of careful stewardship for the fleeting thrill of a high bid. He punctuates the lesson with another marriage analogy, this time about expectations. If you want a marriage that lasts, marry someone with low expectations. He quips. You laugh, but the wisdom shines through. Set the bar for your business relationships on a realistic, long-term alignment rather than unrealistic earnings multiples. That low expectation baseline allows your partnerships to weather storms without succumbing to short-term pressures. As you take notes, you feel a shift in your own portfolio mindset. You recall how you once sold a small rental property after a temporary dip in monthly rents, only to rue the lost opportunity when the market recovered. You remember scanning tech stocks with FOMO, only to bail when headlines turned negative. You vow to hold your best assets for the long haul, unless you see a fundamental change in their value proposition. He finishes with a crisp summary. 1. Whole business discipline. Own it like a legacy. Don't sell for the highest bid. Sell only if the fundamentals crumble or stewardship fails. 2. Minority stake balance for minority positions. Price matters more. Sell when the market price outruns intrinsic value. 3. Patience over yield. Avoid forcing liquidity when cash overflows. Wait for opportunities that fit your circle and value framework. Cure 4. Shareholder partnership. Declare your no-sell intentions publicly, so your partners won't be surprised by rare sales. You feel the clarity flooding in. You start to see your own investments in a different light. Which of your holdings are truly cornerstone assets, and which are mere trading positions? You draft a mental plan. Classify each position as core or trade-in. Then apply sell discipline accordingly. Leaving the hall that day, you carry a new principle in your chest. Sell the bad. Hold the good forever. You remember the smell of the candy store, the rustle of newspaper pages, and the hum of insurance underwriting, each representing a business built to last. You realize that successful capital allocation isn't just about buying right, it's about knowing when to never let go. In the week ahead, you review your financial statements. You mark the stocks you own in full confidence, those you wouldn't sell at any price, and vow to add to them when the market misprices them temporarily. You flag the others as trading stocks, subject to regular review and sale when price deviates from your valuation. With that framework in hand, you log into your brokerage account less and less. You trade fewer shares, preferring to swim with whales rather than chase minnows. You feel the freedom that comes from not obsessing over daily price swings. You know that your core holdings will compound quietly, fueled by dividends and reinvestment, just as Buffett's have for decades. And so you carry this lesson forward into every corner of your financial life. Choose your partners wisely. Build long-term relationships with businesses you understand, and resist the siren song of higher bids unless the sea truly changes beneath your ship. Because in the end, the rarest punches you'll ever use are the ones you refuse to use in haste. And the greatest returns often come not from selling at the top, but from never selling at all. You shift in your seat as he swivels the conversation toward a topic that transcends balance sheets, the purpose of philanthropy. The room's energy shifts. This isn't about compounding returns, but compounding impact. You lean in, curious how the world's most successful investors deploy their fortunes to solve humanity's toughest challenges. He begins with a story of Bill Gates, whose name you associate with software but is now synonymous with ambitious giving. Bill's mother was a huge advocate for United Way, he says, voice warm. So, when he started giving away billions, he didn't think, "What's the flashiest cause?" He asked, "Where can $1 save the most lives?" You picture Gates poring over data late into the night, mapping out how to turn dollars into vaccines, bed nets, or nutritional supplements that could prevent childhood deaths. You recall the first time you heard that Gates reads 15 books a month on global health and development. Now Buffett confirms it. He's methodical. He didn't just declare, "I'm giving away $1 billion a year." He hired experts, epidemiologists, economists, and said, "Show me the metrics, cost per life saved, reduction in malaria incidence, improvements in literacy." You sense the gravity. Bill's philanthropy isn't fueled by emotion alone. It's a rigorous and data-driven endeavor designed to maximize human welfare. Buffett nods appreciatively, as though he's proud of his friend's precision. Then he turns to his own pledges. "My wife and I have decided that 99+% of what we've accumulated will go back to society," he says, voice reflecting both humility and conviction. You feel the weight of that commitment. This is a man who could live 10 lifetimes and still have enough left over. Yet he plans to redistribute every dollar once his and his wife's days draw to a close. He explains how he set up his foundation structure. Very few trustees, no prescriptive instructions, and a clear mandate. "I told them, solve problems that don't have natural constituencies. Don't fund a building that'll bear your name. Fund vaccine distribution in areas where no one else shows up." You realize that by avoiding high-profile projects, he directs resources to issues that won't get attention unless someone is willing to look beyond the headlines. You think back to the United Way meeting in Seattle, where Gates unveiled a plan to invest $1 billion annually in global health interventions. Buffett chuckles. He walked on stage with a chart. "If I invest $1 here, I can save X lives. If I invest $1 there, I can save Y lives." People were blown away by the transparency. You imagine the audience's reaction. Data replacing rhetoric. Lives quantified in the clearest possible terms. Buffett continues, "I've written my trustees one simple letter. I trust your judgment above ground, more than my instructions from 6 feet under. Pursue high-grade solutions to problems that otherwise go unfunded." You sense the trust he places in his team. No micromanagement, just an unwavering belief that smart people will find the right levers to pull. It's like owning a business remotely. You hire the best, set a clear direction, and let them run. He pauses to let you absorb the contrast with corporate boards that meet quarterly, obsessed with revenue growth. "Those boards are short-term machines," he says. "But philanthropic boards, in my view, should be long-term engines of change. They shouldn't measure success by brand awareness or press coverage, but by metrics like child mortality rates, access to clean water, or improvements in rural education." You feel the clarity of his vision. Money isn't an end, it's a tool. And like any tool, Its value depends on how you use it. He emphasizes that philanthropy demands the same discipline as investing. Set clear objectives, gather data, measure outcomes, adjust approaches. I treat my giving like an investment portfolio. He confides, I want the highest social return per dollar. If something isn't working, I reallocate. You reflect on that for a moment? In your own life, how often have you given time or money without clear expectations or follow-up? He's showing you that effective giving means accountability. It means following the money trail to see if lives actually improve, not just if logos appear on brochures. Buffett then offers a story from his own foundations. They once funded a rural water pump project in a remote part of Africa. Initial reports were glowing. Villagers had access to clean water, but follow-up surveys revealed maintenance issues. Spare parts were scarce, training was lacking, and pumps fell into disrepair. Instead of writing off the entire initiative, his trustees redesigned the approach, partnering with local co-ops for spare parts supply and investing in hands-on training. They tracked uptime and health outcomes and saw a dramatic drop in waterborne diseases. You admire how they treated failure not as a reason to pull back entirely, but as an opportunity to learn and refine. Much like a good investor learning from a losing trade. A good philanthropist iterates until the impact is real and sustainable. He looks around the room and smiles. I'm not saying philanthropy is simple or that data solves everything. Human problems are complex, but without metrics, you're gambling, not giving. You feel that ring true too often. Good intentions backfire when they lack the structure that investing or business demands. Then he loops back to his personal philosophy. Society built me. I'm just paying rent. You hear the Midwestern humility in his tone. This isn't a boast. It's a genuine acknowledgement that his success is a function of being born in the right place and time, wired the right way. He feels duty bound to give back, not for accolades, but because it's the only ethical choice. He wraps up with a guiding question for each listener. What are the problems you care about that no one else is funding? Where can your contribution make a difference that won't get funded otherwise? You immediately think of causes close to your own experience. Musical education in underfunded schools, local food banks grappling with supply chains, mental health initiatives for first responders. You see how philanthropy can be personal as well as strategic. As you leave the lecture, you clutch the free checklist link and download the guide. You scroll to the Giving section. It lists key questions. Define your impact metric. Identify implementation partners. Establish a monitoring plan and set a timeline for review. It's a brief but potent roadmap to translating your values into measurable actions. That evening, you draft a small giving plan. You earmark a portion of your quarterly bonus for a local literacy program, but only after you find their impact report. How many students rate at grade level after 1 year? You commit to tracking quarterly updates, adjusting your support based on progress. You also earmark time, 2 hours a month mentoring first-generation college students, measuring success by college entry rates among your mentees. Over the next month, you see a shift in how you think about generosity. No longer is it a vague impulse to donate at year's end. Instead, it becomes a strategic allocation of your resources, time, money, and expertise toward causes where you can measure real outcomes. You feel more engaged, more accountable, and infinitely more hopeful. In the quiet of your home office, You reflect on the day's lessons. You realize that the same principles guiding your investment decisions, circle of competence, margin of safety, discipline amid patience, apply powerfully to giving. Focus within your circle of impact. Invest in proven solutions. Monitor progress and hold for the long term. And so, you step forward into your philanthropy with the heart of an investor and the soul of a giver. You know, there's no ticker symbol for societal progress, but there are metrics: lives saved, students graduated, communities uplifted. You'll track those metrics as carefully as dividend yields, ensuring that every dollar you commit punches a hole in your impact card, one that you'll view not with regret, but with pride at how intentionally you chose to make a difference. You close your laptop and let the glow of your screen fade as he pivots to a perspective that stretches across centuries. You feel your spine straighten. This is the lesson on market cycles and human behavior, where you learn that success often depends not on IQ, but on temperament. He begins by painting the big picture. If you take the entire 20th century in the United States, GDP per capita rose more than sixfold, decade after decade of improving living standards. You nodded, recognizing the transformative power of innovation, infrastructure, and free markets. Then he drops the counterpoint. But the stock market, it was wildly uneven. You lean forward as he outlines 3 monumental bull runs and 3 long stagnations. From 1900 to 1920, the Dow crept from 66 to 71, less than 0.5% annualized. Then, from 1921 to 1929, it rocketed to 381, a 500% surge. But the euphoria crashed, and from 1929 to 1948, the index plunged to 180, a 56-year period with a net loss, even as the underlying economy hummed along. Then came another 24-year upswing through the mid-1960s, followed by a 17-year malaise into the early 80s. Finally, the modern bull run lifted the Dow to heights unimaginable a century earlier. You can almost taste the contrast. The heady optimism before 1929, the despair through the Great Depression and World War II, the vaulting confidence of the post-war boom, the malaise of the 70s. You feel the tension in the room as he recounts those 56% years of stagnation, longer than a typical career. You realize that you could work your entire adult life without seeing a net gain in stock prices. Yet the crowd living through it would never suspect a booming economy beneath. His voice takes on a cautionary timbre. Investors look in the rearview mirror. When prices go up, they pile in. When prices go down, they flee. Here, you wince, recalling your own FOMO-driven trades and panic sells. You're reminded of the dot-com era, when everyone you knew was buying tech IPOs, only to watch fortunes evaporate. You recall the fear in 2008, when every breaking news alert felt like a siren screaming, "Sell everything." He describes that human impulse with vivid imagery. It's like being on a crowded dance floor. When the music's hot, you push toward the speakers. When it gets too loud, you bolt for the exit. You imagine the stampede, the trampled toes, the chaos. You feel that impulse to follow the crowd until you realize that following the crowd often means getting trampled. He shares a graph, the famed chart of the Dow and per capita GDP. The economy, he shows, rose steadily. The stock market zagged wildly. There's no physics formula linking economic growth and market returns. They move on different rhythms. You sense the tension between two worlds, the real one of production and consumption, and the virtual one of prices and sentiment. He shifts to temperament, voice softening. I once wrote that intelligence is a blessing, but temperament is equally important. Temperament is not about smarts. It's about emotional self-control. You reflect on your own moments of greed and panic, the swirling adrenaline when a trade goes your way, the knot in your stomach when it goes against you. You feel the truth of it. You can have dazzling intellect, but still blow your chances if you lack emotional discipline. To illustrate, he tells the story about pension funds in the 1970s. In 1970, they put 10% of new money into stocks because they were euphoric. Then stocks cratered. And by 1978, they put only 9% of new money into stocks, even though prices were cheaper than 8 years earlier. You feel the irony. They chased performance when prices were high, then shunned stocks when valuations were attractive. You sense the collective madness of that cycle. He recounts another era, the internet bubble of the late 1990s. Stocks soared. Ticker symbols flashed. Everyone jumped in, he says, voice tinged with exasperation. Then it burst, and people looked back and wondered, how could we all be so stupid? You've lived through that arrogance. Tweets that proclaimed to the moon and margin calls that haunted many into the next decade. He leans back, letting you ponder the memory of your own digital gold rush. The cheek by jowl chat rooms. The day trading kid who bragged about his 6-figure wins, only to disappear from social media after a brutal sell-off. You recall the wail of, "I should have held," that echoed through your headphones. His voice grows firm. The lesson is this: you cannot predict cycles, but you can control your reactions. When markets are crazy, you calm down. When markets are dour, you start sniffing for bargains. You don't ride the herd. You look at fundamentals. You feel the resolve settling in your chest. No more reflexive selling in panic. No more indiscriminate chasing in euphoria. He peppers in a personal confession. I lived through the 1948-1965 boom, the 1965-1982 slump, and the modern boom. And I did fine in each because I stayed rational. You imagine the young Buffett in the 60s, watching charts, and the older Buffett in the 70s calmly allocating more cash to undervalued gems. You sense that his secret wasn't just intellect, it was steady nerves. Then he elevates the message. You want to be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. You nod. The classic contrarian mantra crystallizing. You picture yourself during the 2008 crisis, drawing deeper breath and scouring for solid businesses trading at fire sale prices. You can taste that calm clarity now, as if you'd had retraining wheels back then. He offers practical advice. Set predetermined rules for yourself. Decide in advance. If the market drops by X%, allocate while Y% more to your best holdings. If the market climbs above your intrinsic value thresholds, sell a portion. You scribble this into your notebook. Pre-commit to tactical moves to avoid emotional whiplash. You feel empowered. No more wrestling with gut-wrenching decisions in the middle of a panic. He shares another vivid story. The decade-long crash in Japan. Even after dropping to zero interest rates, they couldn't revive their stock market. He says, you recall headlines about zombie banks and deflationary spirals. You see that loose money alone isn't a magic pill. Human psychology and deep structural factors matter. You feel the scope of cycles. They can span decades, cross generations, and test the mettle of entire lifetimes. And yet the underlying marvel, is that patient, disciplined investors who stick to their principles rarely lose in the long run. You think of Coca-Cola shareholders from the 1890s, owning that business through wars, depressions, and recessions, yet still enjoying steady returns. He closes this section with a reflective tone. There is no virtue in being right immediately. The real virtue is being right over decades, with as little drama as possible. You feel the inspiration wash over you. Success isn't a thrill ride, it's a marathon. You savor that redefinition, drama-free wealth. As you leave that lecture hall, you sense a profound shift in your inner dialogue. You promise yourself to track not just your portfolio's numbers, but your emotional responses. You'll keep a journal of how you feel when markets surge or plunge, and revisit those entries before making any major moves. The next morning, you set up simple rules in your trading app. If your core holdings fall 20%, you'll automatically allocate a predetermined amount of new capital. If they climb 30% above your entry price and exceed intrinsic estimates, you'll sell a fraction. You breathe deeply, feeling your nerves align with your plan. Over the next few weeks, the market wobbles. You notice that familiar churn in social media, panicked posts, euphoric hype, fear-mongering headlines. But you remain steadfast. You glance at your journal entry from section 10 and recall Buffett's words. Control your reactions. Make pre-committed decisions. You feel a resurgence of calm. In every market swing, you sense the difference between the 2% who succeed and the 98% who don't. It's not raw intelligence or inside information. It's the relentless application of discipline, long-term focus, and emotional composure. You realize that your temperament, honed through these exercises, is now your greatest asset. And so you step into each new market cycle with a steady gaze, knowing that the road ahead will twist and turn, but you have the map of human behavior printed in your mind and the compass of temperament guiding your every punch card decision. You settle back into your seat, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows as he leans in with a twinkle in his eye. Now, he says, you're going to dig into something that makes economists sweat: the role of the Federal Reserve and the curious behavior of currencies. You feel the hairs on your arms rise, not from boredom, but from the promise of insider perspective on forces that move markets and shape entire economies. He begins with a gentle nod toward Alan Greenspan, whose tenure you've heard debated in bars and boardrooms alike. Alan's been at the helm through decades of tumult, he says, voice warm. I've known him since we both worked on the board of Cap Cities back in the 80s. You picture a younger Buffett and Greenspan side by side, quietly scheming over quarterly reports. He's driven entirely by what's best for the American people, Buffett continues, and you sense the sincerity in his words. When Alan steps on the brakes, you feel it. People hate it, but it works. You recall the pain of rising rates in the early 80s under Volcker, and how that harsh medicine crushed inflation but left many gasping. Greenspan's break, you realize, may be gentler, but it still commands respect. He drills the point home. The Fed's brake pedal is more powerful than its gas pedal. When they tighten credit, credit tightens. Your mind drifts to the 2008 crisis, when every tightening move felt like a punch to the gut. Banks froze, markets shuddered, and you watched your screen go red. You remember thinking, why can't they just print more money and make everything okay? Buffett smiles, as though he heard your silent question. Because easy money isn't a magic wand, he says. It can nudge things, but it can't solve structural problems. You nod, connecting the dots with Japan's lost decades. They dropped rates to 0, he points out, and still couldn't revive growth. You recall headlines about quantitative easing and how it sounded like science fiction. Central banks buying bonds with freshly printed yen or dollars. Yet, here you have proof. Printing presses can't conjure demand out of thin air when the economy needs deeper reforms. He shares a personal anecdote. In '94, I called Greenspan. Well, I tried to. I was curious whether the Fed was behind certain market gyrations. Of course, he couldn't tell me. No one can. But you could sense the undercurrents from his speeches. He's got a way of saying things without saying them. You smile at the image of Buffett replaying Greenspan's cryptic remarks, reading between the lines like a codebreaker. Next, he sketches out the mystique of the Fed. People think the Fed controls everything. But remember, there are thousands of variables: global capital flows, fiscal policy, consumer confidence. The Fed might nudge interest rates by a quarter point, but what if another country slashes rates by half a point? Money flows where it's treated best. You feel the truth of it. Your own money sometimes migrated overseas for a hair's breadth of yield advantage and chasing yield into risky waters. He launches into currency mechanics. If Japan runs a trade surplus with us, they end up holding dollars. But selling dollars just shifts those dollars to someone else, France, London, or back to US pension funds. To reverse a trade deficit, you need structural shifts, like investing more in exports or consuming less. But that takes years, not months. And central banks can't force it overnight. You scratch a note. Trade balances, not central banks, mostly drive currency levels. You reflect on your own currency plays, the thrill of betting on a weak dollar, only to watch it surge when oil prices rose or carry traders reversed. You realize now you were chasing short-lived squeezes, not fundamental shifts. Buffett seems to read your thoughts. He smiles and says, "The dollar seems strong now, but remember history. It's been both undervalued and overvalued relative to its purchasing power parity. There's no eternal trend. Currencies ebb and flow like tides. It isn't a straight line. You imagine the ebb and flow, European marks, yen, pounds, each rising and falling as global capital seeks the safest harbors. He warns of currency wars when countries devalue to boost exports. That only ignites tit-for-tat moves and leads to volatility. Investors get whipsawed by headlines. But for a long-term investor, currency moves average out. What matters more is the real return you earn on the business itself, not the paper translation from one buck to another." You feel a sense of relief. No need to be a Forex savant. Stick to your circle and your intrinsic valuations, and currency swings become background noise. Buffett shifts gears to the Fed's gas pedal. Easing can prop up economies, but you have to know when you're inflating bubbles. Your mind flashes to dot-com mania and the housing boom, each fueled, in part, by easy credit. You remember those subprime lenders in your neighborhood who handed out mortgages like candy? He grimaces slightly as he recounts that era. Easy money made it tempting for people to borrow and speculate, he says. But once rates rise or lending standards clamp down, the air rushes out of that bubble like a punctured tire. The Fed can't control where the air goes. It only controls the pressure at the pump. You jot. Bubbles form when liquidity meets speculation. Look for both. Then he circles back to his old friend Greenspan. Allen recognized the risk of irrational exuberance. He even said it publicly once, though he didn't expect the headline to blow up the market. He's a smart guy, but visibility makes his job harder. People credit him for everything when times are good and blame him for everything when times are bad. You chuckle at that. So true. Presidents get credit when jobs numbers rise and scorn when they fall. Central bankers bear the same paradox. You feel a surge of gratitude for Buffett's balanced view. Too often. You've heard simplistic takes. The Fed causes inflation, or the Fed can solve any crisis. Now you see a nuanced truth. They can influence short-term conditions, but long-term growth and currency stability depend on deeper factors: productivity, trade balances, demographics, and fiscal policy. He offers a final nugget on currencies. Don't overthink short-term fluctuations. If you find a great business in your circle trading at a sufficient discount, buy it, regardless of whether the dollar is at 90 or 101 yen and dash. You feel the lightness settling over you. No need to chase every pip in the foreign exchange window. Focus on the business fundamentals and let currency moves play themselves out. As he wraps the discussion, you sense the session arriving at a thematic pivot. Monetary policy is a powerful tool, but it's not a cure-all. Markets are driven by human behavior, fear, and greed, and those aren't things you can legislate or print away. You nod, connecting this back to cycle lessons. You can't predict every twist, but you can control your reactions and anchor decisions in fundamentals. He smiles and leans back for the next question. His trademark sign that the core lesson has been delivered. You sit up straighter, feeling empowered with fresh insight into the Fed's role in the global currency dance. You realize that each time you see a headline about rate cuts or currency swings, you'll recall Buffett's words. Goldilocks isn't coming. Prepare for a range of outcomes and stick to the fundamentals you understand. That evening, you update your investment thesis templates. You add fields for currency risk and central bank influence, but you also note only within circle. You set alerts not for Fed minutes themselves, but for shifts in long-term real economic indicators, productivity growth, trade balances, and fiscal deficits. You remind yourself that the Fed's moves are ripples. What matters are the ocean currents of the real economy. Over the next few weeks, you watch markets react to every Fed statement. Some traders cheer, others boo, and the headlines shriek. But you don't flinch. You check your list of core investments, verify their underlying cash flows, and reassure yourself your durations match your time horizon and your margin of safety cushions any currency wobble. In moments of temptation, to chase a Forex-driven rally or flee ahead of a rate hike panic, you recall Buffett's gentle admonition. Respect the Fed's brake, but don't worship its pedal. Understand the limits of easy money and keep your eyes on real value. Those words hum in your mind as you cruise into the rarefied space of seasoned investors, where knowledge of monetary policy informs decisions, but doesn't dictate them. You close your eyes briefly and imagine Buffett's wry grin, nodding in approval as you navigate the markets with a steady hand. You feel a quiet pride in having absorbed these nuances. Fed, currencies, bubbles, and all, without losing your composure or your commitment to fundamentals. You know this insight will serve you well. whether the next cycle roars or limps. And so you carry forward, ready to face every Fed meeting and currency flux with tempered expectations, anchored by the discipline to stay in your circle of competence and the resolve to value intelligently, no matter how loud the headlines roar. You feel the thrill of market cycles and Fed mechanics settle into your bones. And he leans in with a mischievous grin. "Let's shift gears to entrepreneurship," he says. "Because sometimes the smallest ventures teach the biggest lessons." You lean forward, ready to catch every nugget. He starts with a name you've probably heard: Rose Blumkin, the indomitable founder of Nebraska Furniture Mart. You picture a stately matriarch stepping off the train in the 1920s with $500 in her pocket, a single suitcase, and an iron will. She landed in Seattle with a tag around her neck, couldn't speak a word of English, but she taught herself, bit by bit, from her daughter's kindergarten lessons, Buffett says, voice warm. You imagine Rose standing in the lumberyard of her first store, sizing up customers and products with that sharp eye of hers. She picked a name, Nebraska Furniture Mart, because she figured it'd stand out, he continues. She bought huge lots of merchandise in Chicago and shipped it back, sometimes taking losses just to get the goods. And when the carpets manufacturers tried to squeeze her on price, she took them to court 4 times and won each time. You grin at the David versus Goliath stakes, facing down big manufacturers in the name of fair pricing. It cements in your mind that agility and guts can topple scale when you fight for your customers. Buffett pauses to let you savor the irony. Her store sits on 72 acres in Omaha, a market of 650,000 people. I mean, that's enough furniture for every man, woman, and child. You laugh, picturing that vast showroom brimming with sofas and dining tables. She never missed a beat. She worked till she was 103 and sold the business at 89. Never once asked for an audit. You feel your heart lift at the thought of her fierce independence and unshakable customer focus. He pivots to another story from a different corner of the country. Bill Child of Home Furnishings in Utah. Bill took over his father-in-law's furniture shop, doing $250,000 a year, and grew it to $400 million. You lean back, dazzled by the scale of that growth. How? Buffett asks rhetorically. By outserving the big chains, Sears, Levitt, by knowing each customer by name and offering customized delivery and installation. You nod, recalling how large retailers often lose touch with personal service. Bill Child's secret was nimbleness. He could change a delivery route on the fly, tweak pricing for a local event, and train sales staff weekly on customer empathy. Buffett smiles as he points out the lesson. Scale can amplify mistakes quickly, but nimbleness turns those same mistakes into data points you correct the next day. You jot that down mentally. Agility trumps brawn when you can learn faster than the giants can adapt. Next, he directs your attention to Bob Shaw and Shaw Carpets, who transformed the carpet industry in the Southeast. Bob started with a single stretch of floor to cover, then built a network of mini mills that use scrap steel far more efficiently than legacy producers. You scribble mini mill innovation in your notebook, imagining scrap steel whizzing through electric arcs and emerging as structural beams. He didn't need decades of capital reserves. He needed a clever process and a willingness to challenge the old guard. You realize that small entrepreneurs often invent new business models that large incumbents ignore until it's too late. He ties these threads together. Whether it's a mom and pop store in Omaha or a mini mill in North Carolina, the same rules apply. Serve customers relentlessly. Iterate faster than your competitors and stay true to your values. You feel a spark of excitement. This isn't abstract theory. These stories map directly onto your own side gig ideas. He contrasts that with the perils of scale-obsessed mindsets. Some folks believe you must be the biggest to succeed. But look at Walmart versus Sears. He says, every developer in America wanted Sears as an anchor tenant. Sam Walton got the scraps, rural strips far from urban centers. Yet he killed him over time through superior culture, inventory turn, and a fanatical focus on price. You nod, remembering the sagging Sears catalogs stacked in thrift shops. Walmart's advantage wasn't just his eyes. It was Sam's willingness to serve communities the big guys ignored. You sense the through line, small or large. Your advantage comes from positioning, culture, and execution, not from sheer scale alone. You feel empowered. No need for vast war chests to innovate. You need conviction, creativity, and relentless customer focus. He leans in and offers a framework you can apply tomorrow. 1. Identify a niche where incumbents underserve, like Rose did with discount furniture in a raining Chicago landscape. 2. Build a learning loop. Deliver, get feedback, iterate quickly, like Build Child, refining delivery times based on customer calls. 3. Protect your margin of safety. Operate lean. Reuse resources. Keep costs flexible, like Bob Shaw's mini-mill approach. Offer 4. Cultivate a customer-centric culture. Empower your people to solve problems, not just follow scripts. You picture applying these steps in your own ventures, a consulting side hustle, a local service business, or even an online community. You feel a surge of creative energy. This is the roadmap you've been missing. Then he shares a cautionary note. Don't mistake growth for success. Too many businesses chase annual revenue targets and forget about profitability or brand integrity. I'd rather own a $50 million business making 20% margins than a $500 million business bleeding cash. You feel the truth of that. Healthy margins sustain agility. While bloated growth often unravels when funding dries up, he adds a wry aside. I learned that after funding a few startups that exploded like rockets, fun for a moment, but then gravity hit. You laugh at his self-deprecating humor. Buffett, rocket fuel investor. You feel a sense of kinship. Knowing even legends chase fads and land in burnout, you lean back, absorbing the full arc. Entrepreneurship isn't about being small or big. It's about being right for your context. It's about understanding your circle of competence, iterating with discipline, and never forgetting the people who keep your doors open, the customers. As he wraps this section, he leaves you with a final provocation. In a world obsessed with unicorn valuations and splashy headlines, remember the power of the humble mom and pop. Those who serve their corner of the world with relentless focus often build the most resilient enterprises. You feel a shiver of inspiration. Your corner of the world awaits. Walking out of the hall, you replay these stories in your mind. You think of a neighbor's bakery missing its window on local farmers markets, and you envision a fresh take mobile pastry cart testing flavors door to door. You recall your own expertise in digital marketing and wonder how you could serve under-resourced artisans online with the same personal touch Rose offered under her storefront sign. That evening, you sketch a quick plan. How to partner with your local cafe, how to prototype pop-up shops, how to measure customer delight each week. You earmark one of your final punches for the first pilot, an experiment you can launch next Tuesday. You feel the weight of possibility. You're not chasing the giants. You're designing for your niche. With Section 12's blueprint etched in your notebook, you're poised to transform your side hustle dreams into durable micro-enterprises. You carry that vision with you as you step into the twilight, ready to harness the very qualities that let small businesses outmaneuver empires: creativity, speed, and unwavering dedication to the people you serve. You sit back as the final question winds down, the room hanging on his every word. A young woman on the right side had asked about balancing innovation and tradition, how to honor your core strengths while embracing change. Buffett leans forward, his eyes alight, and delivers an answer tinged with both reverence for history and optimism for the future. I tell my partners, he begins, respect the past, but don't be a prisoner of it. The business that got you here may not take you where you're going. You hear the weight of those words, a call to preserve your core values while staying nimble enough to adapt when the world shifts. He then glances at the clock, as if surprised at how quickly time has flown. Folks, I've got a plane to catch, he says with a grin. You sense the familiar Midwestern understatement? No fuss. Just business as usual for a man accustomed to fitting a lifetime of lessons into an hour or two. Before he stands, he pauses deliberately, scanning the audience one last time. Remember, he says, voice softening, you won't make each decision perfectly. You'll mess up. But if you keep your circle of competence tight, demand a margin of safety, and cultivate strong habits, you'll make enough good calls to outpace your mistakes. You feel those words settle around you like a warm blanket, a practical, comforting, and real. He steps away from the lectern and raises his hand in a gentle wave. Keep the questions coming online. I can't promise to answer all of them, but I promise to read them. And if you ever wonder why you missed a chance or why you held on too long, revisit your punch card rules. They'll guide you back on track. The audience rises in applause, but he holds up a finger again, as though to say he hasn't quite finished. You lean in, curious for every remaining syllable. I've spent my life chasing clarity, he says, voice barely above a whisper. If one thing I've learned, it's this. Clarity isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's in every question you ask yourself before you act. With that, he offers a final nod and steps off stage, leaving the microphone humming softly. A ripple of excitement washes through the hall. You can almost feel the echo of his presence lingering in the wooden floorboards. You rise to your feet, heart pounding, eager to lock in your next moves. You realize that this isn't an ending, but a doorway, an invitation to keep asking, keep learning, and keep refining your own punch card decisions. You leave that hall carrying more than just notes and checklists. You carry a sense of calm confidence, born from knowing that your greatest tool is not flash or speed, but deliberate thought and disciplined practice. In the quiet that follows, you feel the echoes of every punch card lesson settling into your bones. You understand that success, real, lasting success, doesn't come from chasing every bright idea, but from patiently building on a foundation of knowledge, integrity, and resilience. As you walk into the evening air, the horizon seems softer, the bustle of the world a little gentler. You remind yourself that it's okay to pause, to consider, to breathe before you act. Each decision, each question you ask, becomes part of an ongoing conversation with yourself. A conversation guided by principles proven in both triumph and failure. That checklist link may have condensed a lifetime of wisdom into bullet points, but the real work happens in the moments between breaths. When you choose whether to punch your card or hold it for something truly transformative. You'll hear Buffett's voice whenever you hesitate or rush, urging you back to clarity, back to fundamentals, back to purpose. Tonight, you rest. You let the lessons percolate. You trust that when tomorrow brings new choices, you'll face them with the same blend of humility and courage you witnessed on stage. Because you're not just a spectator in someone else's story. You're the author of your own, armed with the hard-won insights of one of history's greatest teachers. In the days to come, the real test will be how you live these lessons, in the projects you choose, the partnerships you form, and the questions you dare to ask yourself. But for now, take a moment to honor this pause, this wind down, this gentle landing after a high-velocity journey through ideas and anecdotes. It's here, in this soft landing, that your next great chapter begins.